So for step 1, charging the battery pack. Well, this is going to be very quick because, as I said in the previous video, I don't see the point in charging a battery when we're not even finished the car. So I wouldn't personally do this step at this point. I would wait until we're closer to checking the RC equipment. So I'm going to leave this alone, but if you want to do this, you can. I just choose not to. I'd rather wait. So we're actually going to move right into step 2, which is attaching the gears. Now this is a fairly extensive step because we're going to be working on both sides of the gearbox and putting everything in. And there's some interesting parts to this. I mean, this one here, E8, is a plastic part that's going to snap onto the propeller joint. And this one, MA9, I've not seen that in kits before, which is this ball thrust bearing. And you can see all the little ball bearings inside of there. Whoops. So I've not seen a bearing like that before in any kit. So this will be an interesting build for sure. Now, the other thing that I found very interesting is the kit actually comes with 4 of the 1150 bearings. So even though it says the bearings are an upgrade on the outside of the box, it does come with 4. So what I've decided to do is for the plastic bearings, so I've put one out here just so you can see it. Most of the kit comes with these ones. I'm replacing them with some rubber sealed bearings that I have. So that's gone. And this one, the metal bearing, this is what comes in the kit, which is these brass bushings basically. I am replacing those with ball bearings, so that's a replacement, so just so you can see. And the 2 bearings that the kit comes with for this step, I'm going to use the ball bearings that came in the kit for anywhere where it says to use the ball bearings, and then I'll just use the ones, my extra ones, for all other areas in the kit. So here we go. There are all of the hardware that we need, all of our gears, the bevel gears. There's the propeller joint that we've got here. We need that. That's going to snap into the plastic part. And then there's this interesting little piece right here, which is in the second half where is it now? Oh, here. It's in the first half where that's got to go in place before we put the gear on top of that. So that's interesting. Kind of an interesting design. So those are all of the bits and pieces, and of course there's our 2 sides of the gearbox, and then of course we've got our grease that comes in the kit, and hopefully there will be enough. But I will set this all up and we'll get started on the first half of step 2. So first off, let's grab this half of the gearbox, and you can see it says 4-wheel drive on one side, and if you turn it around it looks exactly like the part we need, so G4. Now, in order for this shaft to go into this, we need to put this together. And this is a really interesting design because you can see how you've got the 4 prongs. Well, we're going to take that ball thrust bearing and basically just let it sit right there. And it's just going to sit in between. And then there is the metal bearing, you can see, is going to sit on the outside. Now, it doesn't actually snap into place because we have to wait for the shaft to go through. But the one thing it is showing is that we need to grease this up. So before I put that in, I'm going to grab our grease and we're going to grease this gear up. There we go. We've got enough grease on there, I think. And I'll grab it from the other side. We'll grab that thrust bearing. Here, this has got to go down into there, as does our little 850 bearing. So I'm going to slide that down into there so it looks just like that. And if I hold that, you can see that it's going to end up fitting in the inside of there. So now that that's there, we need to grab our propeller joint, and we're going to grab that E8 part I was talking about, it's showing that you take this and it's going to snap into place. So let's see if we hear this. There we go. It's in place. So it's on. And now we have to grease that up and run it through. Now I am going to grease it up because it's going to be sitting inside of that other gear that we put in there. But again, there is a bearing, and typically I wouldn't necessarily grease up something that when using ball bearings. It's just something I don't tend to do. But because this is the gearbox and it is going to into that other plastic gear as well, I am going to grease this shaft all the way up. So now you can see that there is a bearing, and if I just put this down a second, you can see here that the bearing needs to fit right on the other side there, just like that. And then this propeller joint is got to go in, and it's going to have to fit inside. I think we've got it actually. Yeah, inside that gear in the right way, because if you remember the way that is shaped, it's got to go into this gear that same way. So ultimately this is what it should look like. You can see the metal bearing, the gear, the thrust bearing, and on this side you can see that it kind of fits nice and tight to the bearing that we just put in. So that part is done. So now we're gonna work on the bigger gears. So a couple of things we're gonna do now. This one here, which is our drive gear, it's showing MA8, so I'm gonna grab one of the bearings that I switched out for the plastic bushings. That's gonna go on this side, just like that. And on this side, it's showing one of the MA10s, which is the other small 850 bearings. So I'm gonna just put it in just like that. So that is what that gear ends up looking like. Now, there's one other thing that we need to do, and I've not seen this before either, where it's showing there's the MA7. So I am going to grab one of the ball bearings that came into the kit. So this bearing you put into this hole right here. So that's firmly in place. Then we grab one of our drive gearbox joints, and that's going to slide up into there. But as you can see, they're showing you using an E-clip for this. So we're going to have to grab an E-clip, and right down there, it will fit right on the, it kind of fits right onto the gearbox joint. And to do this, I'm going to grab my pliers, make it sure I've got this nice and level. And it will go in. There we go. So there is the E-clip. So now this drive cup is actually in completely secure. It doesn't slide out. And typically on Tamiya kits, that's something that's going to move in and out, and it, you know, it wouldn't be permanent. Whereas with this, it is permanently in there because of that E-clip. So now that that part is in place and we've got the E-clip through, you can see that we need to put in this E2 piece, which was this funny piece right here, which is basically going to sit over top, which is also holding in the little 850 bearing, because if you remember, there wasn't anything really holding it in. Well, once that sits over top, that bearing is not going to slide out at all. So once that is on, we have this tube that's going to end up going over top of it. And you can see that they're telling you to grease the outside. So I think what I'll do is, yeah, well, let's do that. So I'll grease it up. It's a messy job, but somebody's got to do it. Okay, then we're going to take that and we're going to slide it over top, just like that. So now that the tube is on, we're going to grab the drive gear that we have here. And you can see that it's got gears on the other side, and it does show you greasing everything. So we're going to grease this gear up. Because that's going to fit onto the other side of this, the gear that we put inside the gearbox. So I'm going to slide this through. We'll see if that bearing stays in place. Hopefully. There we go. The bearing's loose. There we go. So we'll slide that over top and it sits there. So you can see the gear inside is running with the gear that we put in earlier. Now we still have to do the grease on this part, but I'm just waiting a minute. I want that one in because I kind of want to do a test fit too. I want to make sure that this is all going to sit correctly. So you can see here, they're telling you to grease up the little shaft, the MA11. So we'll do that. There we go. And you can see that it's going to go inside the joint that we put on earlier. And then the, what is it? The MA23, so the bevel gear left, this one right here is going to sit on there just like that over top. Now that we've got all of the gears in place, I am going to grease this up. So I'm just going to start squeezing this through. Let's get some grease on the gear. And I mean, I'm being fairly liberal with the grease, but I don't want to do it too much, because if you're trying to, you know, make sure you have enough for the rest of the kit, then you might not want to over grease it. Or the other option is just to get some more grease, just so you have some on hand. So again, here we can spin this around. We're going to grease this part of the gear up as well. And there we go. So I've got enough on there on both the outer gear, the inner gear, the one underneath. So the left side of the gearbox is ready to go. So we can now start working on the right side of the gearbox, which is also where we're going to start putting the differential gear together. So for this side of the gearbox, the first thing to do, which I think is the best and easiest thing, is let's get the other joint attached with the E-clip and get that out of the way. So again, the MA7 is one of the ball bearings that actually came with the kit. So we're gonna push that down and into place. There we go. Grab our gear joint, slide that through, and again, we've got an E-clip to deal with. So we've got to get that onto the joint itself. Grab a pair of pliers, make sure that that's on. There we go. And so now that joint is in place. And again, it's kind of interesting because now that joint is more or less permanent, where in most kits that's not the case. So that's cool. That is attached. Because that's a bit more finicky, and it's probably the easiest thing to do first. So then we have our other gear. So here is the MA22, which is going to slide over top of that and sit just like that. And that's got to be greased up. So we're going to grease up the gear. Run the grease all the way around. Just like that. Now, once that is done, you can see it there, we then have to put on the differential spur gear. Now you can see that they're showing you greasing up these gears. Well, what I tend to like to do is grease them afterwards. And you can see on this side, you can't put the gears in, this side you can. So I will give this a little bit of grease on either pinpoint from either side. You'll see what I mean, because you can see how these are going to end up fitting inside of each of those. So the grease is there, which is going to help hold it in. 1, 2, and 3. So now they're in. Then I will use the grease again, and while they're in place, I can spin the gears and put the grease on at the same time. And I find this is the easiest way to do things. I have seen, actually John Foster does something different, John Foster RC, where he uses a brush to brush on the grease for each gear. So everybody's got their own method. I like doing this, but I know his method is a good one too. Okay, so there's enough grease on the differential gears. So you can see that how this is going to fit on. We need this gear with the MA22, and then this one with the openings of where you put the gears on facing out, so that it's going to sit like that. And again, we need to grease this up. So I'm using the joint on the other side to move it. And this helps so that you don't get grease on your hands as well. So I'm just going to spin that around and put more grease on. And again, because this is a gearbox, I tend to be a little bit more liberal with it. I'd rather have more grease on the gear in the gearbox than not enough. There we go. So that is the right half of the gearbox complete. And that is it for step 2. So now that step 2 is finished, we're going to move on to step 3 and basically attach the 2 gearbox halves together and add a couple other pieces as well.